I'm Alison Nelson. I'm the Director for Allied Health and Workforce Development at the Institute for Urban Indigenous Health. I'm an occupational therapist by background. The Institute is a community-controlled Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health organisation. We're a regional body. We're formed by the 4 community-controlled Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health services in southeast Queensland. And our footprint is Caboolture to the Gold Coast border, as far west as Laidley and as far east as North Stradbroke Island. So in that catchment we have 18 clinics that are primary healthcare clinics, but we have a visiting allied health service model where we have all of our allied health sitting under the one roof, but we disperse and go into various clinics on various days. So students form a really integral part of the workforce development story of the Institute, and in fact the building of the Institute. We've had students working in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander health services for over 40 years, but particularly over the last 4 or 5 years we've been able to grow student placements from about 30 to about 330 a year, and from 3 disciplines to about 16 disciplines. So we've really expanded the opportunities for students, and we really value having students on placement with us for a whole bunch of reasons, for the opportunities for learning for our own clinicians, but also for what students bring in their enthusiasm and their ideas. Our Deputy CEO at one stage, because she was so impressed with the students we were having, decided we didn't need to employ staff anymore. We'd just go sit outside the refec and listen to the great ideas that students were coming up with. So, students have really infiltrated the fabric, I guess, of the Institute and who we are and what we do. So we employ occupational therapists in both paediatric and adult community OT roles, we've got a growing social health service, so drug and alcohol mental health services, in which we employ social workers and psychologists and counsellors and family support workers. But what we didn't have in that team was an occupational therapy role. So enter Roz. So we were really keen. We're doing some work in placements for school-based trainees from an Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander school, and developing those opportunities for employment beyond their traineeship. And we're starting to kind of play in this space of employment. So we got thinking about the links between people who have mental health conditions and what the sort of purposeful, meaningful activity is beyond sitting in a room with a clinician. And so we were really keen to explore the idea of employment and what was out there in the community. So who could we link with who might be able to support us in our organisation in supporting our clients into employment and education and training, and where were the gaps and what might be the opportunities for the role of somebody sitting within our organisation. And I'd heard about a project that had been developed some time ago where an employment person had been sitting within an organisation, and the outcomes from that, and that got me thinking about exploring that. So we were really keen to set up a student placement along those lines, and I'd had contact with some of the ACU staff coincidentally in the meantime, and sort of thought about, well, this would be a great role emerging placement opportunity. So we approached ACU, and they sent us Roz, who had mental health experience, which was very exciting for us. And I think that was a really key part of the placement establishment, but also the placement success, was having a clinician / supervisor from the university who came with a set of skills that we didn't have within our organisation, who was able to really provide that clinical knowledge and skills and the systems knowledge about mental health in community. That just made such a big difference to our placement in terms of us not having to stress about that or worry about it, because we knew that Roz had all that under control and could really mentor and support the students through learning about some of those things. So that was really great.
So my name is Roz Harrington. I'm an occupational therapist, and I work as a lecturer in occupational therapy at Australian Catholic University. And part of my role there is to organise role emerging placements, and also to support community engagement for all of our students. So our students in community engagement work with communities that are culturally and linguistically diverse, in Indigenous communities as well as with people with disabilities, and in local community groups, and with people who are socially disadvantaged. So they do that in second year, and this was a really nice transition to actually work with the Institute with some third year students to apply some of that knowledge within a role emerging placement context. context. So I was very happy when I heard about the opportunity, and we've certainly worked well together, I think, so far with developing that. Once we found out about the opportunity, I met with Alison and Christelle, and we sat down and actually talked about what the needs of the Institute were around this emerging role for OT, looking at vocational re-entry or vocational entry for some of the Institute clients who have mental health conditions, and what sort of things could support that. So with the role emerging placement model that we use at ACU, we actually fund an off-site placement coordinator for the practice educator for the students, who work with the students every week during the placement around organising their placement activities and their learning outcomes, and liaising with the Institute in this case around how to provide those learning activities, as well as how to meet the needs of the Institute in terms of emerging that role of OT within the service. So each week, before we started, I met with Alison and Christelle, and we actually looked at a plan for the students' placements over the 5 weeks, and how that would be negotiated, because in this placement we had about half of it was role emerging placement and half of it was a standard clinical stream type placement. So working out, making sure that there was enough room in the timetable for the students to actually produce some good project outcomes around giving some advice to the Institute and developing a project report around how to improve vocational pathways for people within the service, but also having enough time for the students to actually get some really good clinical experience and good supervision and develop those skills, and definitely the benefit of working with people from an Indigenous background and honing those skills that they'd started to develop at university. One of the benefits of role emerging placement is that provision of the off-site placement coordinator during the placement, and so within that role I came in once a week and I met with the students, and often with Alison as well as the on-site supervisor of the placement, to look at their project, the role emerging component of their placement, look at how they were going with their project and plan that project, and that would be once a week. And then as well we had email communication and telephone communication at other times during the week. So for the 2 students it was 8 hours of supervision each week that we were providing, alongside the clinical supervision that staff within the Institute were providing during the placement. I think because of the type of project that we were doing and what the Institute wanted out of that project, which was around recommendations on how to extend this role of looking at employment outcomes for its clients, it really required a bit of pre-planning between myself and the Institute around who were the stakeholders that we needed to negotiate with, who did the students need to talk to actually develop up their plan and their project report with some recommendations. So we identified some key researchers that they needed to link with. I met with the students before the placement started and gave them some reading material that was really important for them to connect with, and then actually organised for them to meet with a very well-known vocational researcher within mental health at the Queensland Mental Health Research Institute. So that was the first day of the placement. So they really hit the ground running, and Alison and I both came to that interview with them. But then we had also set up, Alison had identified key people within the service who were already doing some work in terms of trying to improve employment outcomes for their clients. So the social health team within the Institute and other people within the service, to really talk about what was the current pathway like in terms of helping people to get into employment, and what were some of the challenges and barriers, and what their experience was in terms of linking with employment services in the community that could actually help people to find work. So we had like a fairly detailed list of all the stakeholders our students needed to link with, and then it was really a matter of keeping them on track during the placement around making sure that they'd met with everyone and that they were collating the data and really starting to analyse that data for the project report.